We've had 80 years of linear TV, and it's been amazing. And in its day, the fax machine was amazing. The next 20 years will be this transformation from linear TV to internet TV. Reed Hastings, CEO and founder of Netflix. Online streaming content has taken the world by storm, quickly becoming the main way many consume their various forms of entertainment, and only a decade after the first streaming service made its way to the internet. In this video, I wish to focus my attention on the impacts the new medium has had on television specifically, from both a production standpoint and a viewer standpoint, and what it all means for the future of television. But first, let's do a quick dive into the history of broadcast media. The idea of seamlessly streamed entertainment isn't necessarily a new concept, with similar ideas having been featured in science fiction as far back as 1879, with artist George du Maurier's depiction of the telephonoscope, a fictional invention by Thomas Edison that could transmit light as well as sound. Edward Bellamy depicted a music room in his 1888 novel Looking Backward, where music is transported seamlessly through phone lines, and French author Albert Robida also features the use of a telephonoscope in his 1890 novel Le XXe siècle, la vie électrique, which translates roughly to the 20th century, the electric life. These works of art all forecast the era of broadcasted entertainment, which would become a reality with the invention and eventual widespread use of radio broadcasts in the early to mid-1900s, with the first commercial radio broadcasts airing in the year 1920. Over the next few decades, radio would begin to establish itself as a proper form of entertainment, ushering what has been referred to as the golden age of radio. Being the first form of entertainment to use a broadcasted medium, the radio would ultimately become incredibly popular amongst the American population, with families often gathering around their home radio to listen to their favorite programs live, of which a variety of genres that would later become synonymous with television were created, such as live sports, play-by-plays, quiz shows, soap operas, variety shows, and more. Radio dominated the broadcast industry until about the 1950s, when the sales and usage of television skyrocketed after the end of World War II, both due to new advancements in the technology and a decreased price because of mass production. Many of the forms of entertainment that had been born on the radio quickly became adapted into visual form to be broadcasted on the television. However, these broadcasts would be held to a much higher level of restrictions than its predecessor. In all developed broadcasting systems, the characteristic organization, and therefore the characteristic experience, is one of sequence or flow, describes media scholar Raymond Williams, who coined the term flow with regards to television programming in his book Television, Technology and Cultural Form. He went on to further describe this flow as a continuous succession of images which follows no laws or logic or cause and effect, but constitutes a cultural experience of watching television. In other words, the flow of any particular channel or network describes and forms a basis of how the network structures and schedules their programming to best keep hold of audiences from one program to the next. The networks had control over what the audiences watched, and thus the programming was designed to appeal to the mass market to ensure the highest level of viewership. And for most of television history, this flow remained unchallenged. The flow of television, however, would begin to fluctuate as new technologies continued to emerge, such as the remote control device, often referred to simply as the remote or clicker depending on where you live, the video cassette recorder, or VCR, and the digital video recorder, or DVR, allowing audiences more control over what media they consumed and how and when they consumed it. These fluctuations disrupted the flow laid out by Williams. The flow of television, while continuing to evolve along with these industry advancements, would ultimately be challenged by the advent of the internet. Founded in 1997 and originally named Kibble, Netflix's DVD by mail rental service went online in 1998. Originally a pay-per-rental service, much akin to rental stores such as Blockbuster, Netflix would eventually adopt a subscription-based service only 2 years after launching. In the year 2007, as broadband internet speeds continued to increase, the compression technologies were getting better and better, Netflix began offering the streaming service it is known for today, allowing members to instantly watch movies online. While the development of video conferencing and compression technologies eventually led to the video streaming services enjoyed by millions today, they would not become commercially viable until decades after the first video phone transmission, with the development of the picture phone by Bell Labs in 1964, which would ultimately fail to take off due to its high cost. These hurdles would finally begin to be overcome with the increased bandwidth capabilities emerging in the 1990s, in combination with advances in video and data compression. Over the last century of television, a certain way of doing things, or the industry lore, has been established and remained, for the most part, unchanged. That is, until the age of digital media. The history of television before the advent of streaming can be split into 3 eras. The network era, in the 1950s to 1980s, the multi-channel era, 1980s to 1990s, and the post-network or post-TV era, 1990s till about the 2010s. These eras of television established what Timothy Havens defines as the industry lore of television, specifically the conventional knowledge among industry insiders about the rise of popularity in streaming services has led to the emergence of the digital lore, leading to companies beginning to launch their own streaming services, such as Hulu and Amazon's Prime Video. But from its inception until 2013, Netflix was still simply a distribution service for other companies' content, much like their new competitors in the over-the-top streaming marketplace. With this move to streaming having become extremely successful business model, Netflix took the next big step in shifting the industry lore, creating original, high-quality streaming television content, taking a page out of HBO's playbook. In the 1990s and early 2000s, HBO, a subscription-based network that focused on airing theatrical films, HBO originally standing for Home Box Office, had begun producing its own content, with the goal of creating high-end television programs that had high budgets and did not need to adhere to the regulations laid down by the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, due to its subscribers having voluntarily bought into their programming and not relying on advertisers to fund their productions. Not only did the creators behind HBO's programs have much more freedom than usually given for television shows, the number of people who turned into each specific show no longer mattered as long as their subscriber count continued to rise, allowing for bigger risk-taking. HBO's success would ultimately begin to change the television lore that had been fairly static over the previous decades, with other channels beginning to follow suit, such as Showtime and Starz, with high-budget hits like Dexter and Spartacus respectively. Even some basic cable channels such as AMC were able to begin creating higher caliber content, such as Mad Men and Breaking Bad, by negotiating higher paying contracts with cable service providers. This brings us back to Netflix's plans for producing their own content, with their co-CEO, Ted Sarandos, stating, "Our goal is to become HBO faster than HBO can become us." Unlike HBO, Netflix did not need to rely on being a subscription-based service to allow themselves and their creators freedom to produce the groundbreaking content they envisioned, as the FCC does not regulate online video distributors. While HBO may have reconfigured television lore during the late 1990s and 2000s, Netflix would go on to create the new digital lore that would alter the television landscape completely. In 2013, Netflix released their first of what would become many original programs, which are fittingly referred to as Netflix Originals, with House of Cards. The television show, which followed Academy Award-winning actor Kevin Spacey as Frank Underwood, an amoral and corrupt politician, as he initiates an elaborate plan to attain political power. The show would go on to receive massive critical acclaim, while also winning multiple Emmys, Golden Globes, and other awards. The success of Netflix is obvious at this point, with it still maintaining the highest number of subscribers compared to its competitors. While these platforms have seen recent success with their original content, they all made their beginnings utilizing already existing libraries. Broadcasting previously aired episodes of a television program, referred to as reruns, is not a new practice, and has been the staple of many television networks, making up a large portion of their scheduled program, with content producers selling the rights of their shows to off-network television stations and cable channels to continue to air these programs after their initial airing. With regards to reruns, Derek Compare notes that much of the history of radio and television broadcasting in the 20th century concerned the industrial and cultural exploitation of repetition. This reliance on old content is integrated into Williams' ideas of televisual flow, creating a sort of rhythm to their scheduled programming, primarily focusing on familiarity and repetition. And Gilbert describes this type of televisual flow as the ultimate pushed content, a safe and reliable form of content that has consistently filled the linear programming schedule outside of the network's prime time. She notes that reruns act as a form of comfort entertainment, one that is both familiar and convenient. Off-network syndication of previously aired programming has been an established means for programs to remain profitable. One example of this is that of Friends, an extremely popular sitcom originally airing from the mid-1990s to the mid-2000s, which is estimated to continue to make $1 billion each year through syndication, with each cast member contracted to receive 2% of this revenue, which comes out to about $20 million each. This, however, is based on the model used during the age of legacy television, with which the audience had no control over which episodes they watched, or even how many episodes they watched. The rise of streaming services such as Netflix and Hulu brought in an age of always-on syndication, and with it, renegotiations. This old television programming has been vital to the growth of streaming services as a whole. In the early days of streaming services such as Netflix and Hulu, these negotiations presented a much-needed and low-risk revenue stream for studios, as the back catalog content they were licensing was often off-air and no longer in demand. While these third-party streaming rights quickly became a significant source of revenue for many production companies, they also shined a light on the value that these legacy television programs held, ultimately leading to the trend of vertical integration with studios opting to create platforms to stream their own content. Following the trend of the industry giving more and more control to the consumer, streaming services have given audiences the ultimate form of control by not only giving the access to a vast library of decades worth of television programming, but also allowing consumers to view these programs in any order they choose, and on their own schedule. This move would ultimately undercut the value of airing these same programs on off-network channels. According to Gilbert, the expansion of television into online distribution fundamentally destabilizes the conventions of financing long held in legacy television. This expansion has not only changed the financial aspects of television reruns, but also how they are consumed. The pleasure of watching reruns on broadcast television came from the comfort and familiarity they provided, with many scholars noting the banality of the practice. According to Derek Compare, many syndicated programs can be seen as habitual rather than compelling, just-see TV rather than must-see TV, with many choosing to tune into these programs for reasons ranging from nostalgia to boredom, leading the practice to be seen as passive by nature. While algorithms and autoplay features may seem to replicate the pleasure sought by this structure, streaming television online changes consumption of reruns from a passive process to an active one. Episodes are often sorted in the correct narrative order and can be watched on the schedule of the consumer rather than the network, often designed to encourage binge watching by having the next episode play automatically after the current one finishes. Their incorporation into a larger media matrix reconfigures how viewers engage with older content, as the demands of navigation and selection complicate the understanding of reruns as a passive entertainment. Netflix set the stage for the reconceptualization of reruns, but only as a platform to build something bigger. In a TED Talk from 2018, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings talks about how producing original content was not an idea that came out of the popularity as a service, but instead having always being a goal for the company, even when they were simply a DVD by mail service. Hastings notes that while they have become a place where many consume various programs, such as AMC's Mad Men, they do not associate that program with Netflix. The goal in creating original programs, similar to original content from broadcast television networks, is to create brand recognition with their platform. In other words, a reason for consumers to subscribe. Due to their subscription framework, as Hastings explains, the actual ratings of a Netflix original versus licensed content has no effects on profits, so long as the original succeeds at making the brand stronger, thus incentivizing others to join the service. As more streaming services began to rise, so did the creation of more original content from each one, such as Apple TV Plus with Ted Lasso, Disney Plus with The Mandalorian and WandaVision, and Amazon Prime Videos with The Boys, and the soon-to-be most expensive television show in history, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Even HBO began producing content exclusively for their streaming service HBO Max, such as Raised by Wolves and Peacemaker. While Netflix wasn't the first to attempt to replicate HBO's idea of narrative-driven, complex, serialized quality television, their approach to delivering its content differed. Rather than their new episodes airing on a weekly basis, Netflix chose to instead release every episode online at once, capitalizing on the idea of binge watching that had become synonymous with the streaming service. Binge watching refers to watching a number of episodes of a show in one sitting, one after another, although differing from watching a marathon of reruns aired on broadcast television. The phenomenon can be linked to the rising sales of DVD box sets in the early to mid-2000s, which would contain an entire season of a given series, giving consumers the ability to watch as many episodes as they want at any given time, often consecutively. While the advent of VCRs in the decades prior allowed viewers to time-shift the content they wish to consume by recording it for later playback, as Compare notes, this action does not change the flow established by the network, only postponing it. The purchasing or renting of a DVD box set, however, allowed the consumer to completely disconnect it from its original or syndicated schedule. With Netflix already offering full seasons of their acquired content at the click of a button through their streaming service and via DVD by mail before that, they would go on to develop what has been referred to as a binge model with regards to releasing their own original content. As Netflix CEO Reed Hastings explains, with episodic content, especially serialized, it's so powerful to have all the episodes at once, something he had noticed when the company had begun shipping DVD box sets of television shows during the time as a DVD by mail rental service. When releasing their first original series, House of Cards, Netflix decided to embrace this idea, and instead of releasing episodes on a weekly basis, all 13 episodes of this first season were released together at the same time. While the binge model of releasing a new television show has proven to be popular not only with audiences, but also with other streaming platforms, being adopted by services such as Amazon Prime Video and Hulu, it seems not every platform agrees with Hastings with regards to delivering an entire season at once. Even with Netflix still using the binge model for all of its original television content almost 10 years after it launched its first show, some online content providers have decided to maintain the weekly release schedule that had become the norm during the days of broadcast television. When Disney Plus launched its first set of television shows on November 12, 2019, High School Musical, The Series, and The Mandalorian, only the first episode of each was released, a model they have continued to employ. Even Amazon Prime Video and Hulu, examples of platforms that originally adopted a binge model, have switched to a weekly release schedule for recently released shows. Traditionally, legacy television series have been structured based on each individual episode, with the pilot acting as a big hook to gain audiences' attention and convince them to return the following week, with following episodes utilizing variations of a particular plot pattern that had been established. This is not only the result of a weekly schedule to which these series are bound, but also the traditional way shows were financed in the past, with most major networks opting to order a specific number of episodes at a time, beginning with the pilot before moving on to the main series. When producing their first original series, House of Cards, Netflix, unlike most traditional networks, opted for a straight-to-series model, committing to the development of an entire season at a time. In the case of House of Cards, Netflix invested $100 million for 2 full seasons. This ultimately gives more time and power to the creators, allowing for them to structure the overall narrative throughout the entire season, rather than one episode at a time. Regarding the 2-season order, House of Cards creator Beau Willimon noted, "I thought of seasons 1 and 2 as a combined entity, a 26-hour movie. An analysis of several well-known Netflix original series shows that they followed a 3-act structure mostly associated with films. While the trend of utilizing more complex and multi-layered narrative structures is consistent with much of the original content being presented on other online streaming platforms, it is not new to television as a whole, with many shows beginning to adopt this framework during the late 1990s and the early 2000s. HBO is often credited with kicking off this trend, and not without reason, as many of their early original offerings stood apart from what was found on network television at the time. Series such as The Wire, The Sopranos, and 6 Feet Under helped HBO establish its brand as the place to watch quality TV, supporting the network's slogan of "It's not TV, it's HBO." Over the next decade, other networks took notice of the potential of restructuring how they delivered televisual narratives in order to develop a distinguishable brand of their own, with the likes of AMC, FX, and Showtime being notable examples. Broadcast television, unlike their subscription-based and cable network counterparts, were generally held to a higher level of regulatory restrictions, but this did not stop them from also beginning to invest higher budgets towards developing television series with more complex narratives, such as ABC's Lost, CBS's Jericho, and NBC's Heroes. However, it can be argued that the emergence and continuous growth of popularity of online streaming platforms such as Netflix, with their higher level of viewer agency, has pushed for a more mainstream shift away from the conventional narrative structures of television's past. Netflix has not been shy regarding their want to be seen as the new place for quality TV, and the control over the viewing schedule Netflix and other streaming services bestows upon their audiences, along with the lucrative subscription-based financial models, make them more adept to create televisual content with more complex narratives than what can be produced and distributed on broadcast TV or even cable. But with this new level of control comes a new level of choices, which begs the ultimate question: what are we going to watch tonight? In 2006, when Netflix was still just a DVD by mail rental service, they launched a contest to develop a new recommendation algorithm, simply called Netflix Prize, offering a $1 million prize to the first admission to increase the accuracy of the system being used at the time, Cinematch, by at least 10%. In September of 2009, the prize was awarded to Belcor's Pragmatic Chaos team, besting the Cinematch prediction ratings by 10.06%. The goal of a recommendation algorithm is to suggest titles to viewers based on the number of factors, such as how the viewer has rated similar content, what content they have viewed or queued, and even personal data such as their age, gender, and geographics. Collecting viewer data to make decisions on what programming is popular, which ones to renew, and which ones to cancel is nothing new, with the Nielsen rating system being the primary source of audience measurement information in the United States for the majority of television history. However, not without its criticisms, specifically due to its small sample sizes, response bias from viewers being aware that they are part of the sample, and ultimately how the system has become increasingly outdated with new technological innovations. The rise of digital media and user-generated data that came with it has led to a new understanding of the consumer. According to Aaron Fisher and Yoav Mahoza, there are three major socio-technological features that distinguish the current age of digital media from mass media of the past: user-generated data, interconnected platforms, and algorithms, which together has led us to a new understanding to what they refer to as the algorithmic episteme. In an interview, Ted Sarandos commented on how the level of user data has increased since their introduction of the streaming service, stating, "Here is what the data from our DVD business tells us. We know what we shipped to you, and we know when you returned it. I have no idea if you watched it. I have no idea if you watched it 20 times. With streaming, we have the insight into every second of the viewer experience. I know what you have tried and what you have turned off. I know at what point you turned it off. It's very sophisticated." This implementation of big data sets has created what Benjamin Burrows describes as the algorithmic audience, noting that Netflix feels that it knows what people like to watch through its analysis of data compiled through every part of its user interface. In the current digital age, algorithms don't work alone when it comes to television series becoming mainstream, as social media plays a large role in how many television shows gain and maintain their popularity. While watching television has been a social activity throughout its history, audiences today often turn to online social media platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit during and after watching a program, using these sites to watch related videos, check program-related updates, and to find out others' opinions on the selected program. Research shows that the more a viewer engages in online activities related to their favorite program, which have been referred to as engaging in social TV, the greater their satisfaction with and investment into these programs become. This phenomenon has been utilized by studios in an effort to advertise their upcoming shows, and while not limited to streaming television, connecting with their audiences through these online social channels has been integral for online streaming services to advertise their new content. While the exact why and how anything ultimately goes viral on the internet mostly remains unknown, that does not stop organizations from trying to push their products to this level of fame, often through the process referred to as social media seeding. This type of word-of-mouth advertising isn't necessarily new. However, before the age of the internet would have ultimately been limited to conversations between friends and acquaintances. Social media has allowed for this form of marketing to expand beyond those of a given social circle, including strangers on the internet, with many brands, including those outside of the entertainment industry, have seen how utilizing the impact online influencers have across multiple social media platforms can help create a sort of echo chamber to encourage more and more positive user-generated content related to their product. These online discussions not only help spread awareness, increase entertainment value, and increase social engagement surrounding a given program, but can also act as an analytical tool, referred to as social network analytics, to measure the level of sentiment and acceptance viewers have regarding a program. Research suggests that these social recommendations are becoming a more effective strategy when compared to algorithmic recommendations, with Netflix's recent international release, Squid Game, acting as an incredible case study regarding the matter. Using social network analytics, researchers found that when opinion leaders were tweeting, they attracted replies and generated conversations about the show's plot, generated recommendations, led to anticipation of the release of the show, and produced comparisons to other shows. Netflix began its life as a streaming service by licensing other networks' content, which originally benefited both by providing a library for Netflix's customers and a new form of revenue for said networks. While these streaming services today are becoming more known for their original content, they continue to acquire streaming rights to shows, albeit with different motives. In 2010, AMC had expressed an interest in canceling the popular and critically acclaimed show Breaking Bad, citing low viewership. While AMC ultimately changed their mind on the matter, their show's producer, Sony Pictures Television, knew their hit show was still close to being on the chopping block and approached Netflix to have the first 3 seasons available on their platform before the 4th began airing. Breaking Bad would ultimately become a huge hit on the platform, which led to higher ratings for new episodes still airing on AMC, with the viewership of the 5th season finale, which was also the final episode of the entire series, being 5 times higher than the previous season. Preemptive licensing agreements such as these have made streaming services less of a threat to traditional television and more of a support, helping to counter the risks that are associated with developing series with more complex narratives, and made straight-to-series orders a more viable option for commercial broadcast networks. Another example of this strategy is CBS's Under the Dome and Extant, in which CBS worked out a deal with Amazon Prime Video for early streaming access for each show in exchange for a financial commitment. Emily St. James argues that the rise of Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime in the world of TV has proven to be comparable to the rise of DVD in the world of film. It's pumping ridiculous amounts of money, even for catalog items, into a fragile network economy. Network TV may no longer occupy the center of the broadcast universe, but it doesn't need to. A good show, a show that people will still want to binge watch, can pop up anywhere, and the potential upside for it, even if it tanks on its first run, is enormous. Netflix and other streaming services' ability to push struggling shows through the mainstream stratosphere, commonly referred to as the Netflix effect, has allowed other networks to place bigger bets on the shows they decide to produce, leading to higher quality content being produced for those networks as well. However, as more streaming services begin to become available, it was only a matter of time before networks began to pull their content in order to move them onto their own streaming services, with the networks originally known as the Big Three all launching their own platforms. NBC with Peacock, CBS with Paramount Plus, originally CBS All Access, and ABC utilizing the Walt Disney Company's acquisition of Hulu. These platforms offer content that has been aired on their own broadcast networks, as well as original content exclusive to each service. As mentioned numerous times in this video, the success of streaming services can mostly be attributed to the addictive nature of binge-watching content on their own schedule. One question that many did not expect to have a direct answer to is, what would audiences do if they had all the time in the world to binge their favorite or old shows? However, global lockdowns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic gave an answer to this question loud and clear. They will binge them all. Streaming services hit an all-time high during the recent lockdowns, as many chose to binge-watch the shows they love or haven't had time to get through during their time in isolation. Not only were audiences turning to streaming services as a way to cope with their ongoing pandemic and being stuck in their homes, but they also used it as a means to socialize with others, another aspect of television, especially with regards to streaming television, that I have highlighted. The first and arguably biggest viral television show to rise amongst the lockdown was Tiger King. As Tanya Horrick notes, a crucial feature of Tiger King as viral TV par excellence was that its bingeability extended beyond Netflix to social media platforms. There was a therapeutic, if ethically dubious, value in extracting scenes from Tiger King and turning them into internet memes in order to crack jokes about lockdown life during the global pandemic. The complete control over their watching schedule afforded to them by these online services and a completely empty schedule, it only makes sense that many consumers turn to streaming services and their social media accounts to both cope and socialize during this time. According to Horrick, COVID-19 illuminated the profoundly social properties of binge-watching in a streaming era through the inventive ways in which people use technology and platforms to negotiate new forms of digital intimacy and to find ways to watch together while physically apart. With the 2-year mark of this global pandemic having just passed a few weeks prior to writing the script, it is still early to know for sure what the lasting effects it will have on the streaming culture as a whole. That being said, as the world continues to open its doors as the pandemic continues to wind down, it seems like online streaming services have cemented their foot as the future of television distribution, especially as the market continues to grow each year. The advent of streaming television has changed the way many consume televisual content, while continuing to move the trends that studios follow when producing said content. Complex serialized television series, both old and new, are continuing to gain popularity. likely due to their abundance on these services and the flexibility and control viewers have over what they watch having increased at a seemingly exponential level when compared to the progress made over the history of television prior to the internet. I would argue, however, that these changes, while drastic in nature, are still simply a part of the ever-evolving lore surrounding television. What was once referred to as the flow of watching television has been suddenly transformed into more of a push, as popular programs are no longer fitted into the most popular spot on the schedule, but instead on the front pages of your streaming service and social media platform of choice, either with the help of a recommendation algorithm or word of mouth, all thanks to the advancements in digital technologies. And while I maintain my concerns regarding the current overflow of services beginning to resemble a cable 2.0 of sorts, I believe that the shift to streaming and on-demand television, while arguably more disruptive than previous shift in the industry, will continue the evolution of what it means to be television well into the future. Considering the infancy of the streaming industry at the time of writing, it remains unknown to what that future will look like. But it is still clear as to what the future of the medium will still be: television. Thanks for watching.